Welcome, brave souls, to another chilling journey into the unknown. Tonight, we delve into 3 spine-tingling tales that will chill you to the core. From a mysterious town where silence is the only sanctuary to a hidden score that summons ancient horrors, brace yourself for a night of terror unlike any other. Dim the lights, turn up the volume, and prepare to face the darkness. This is Fear Files.
The forest loomed dark and dense, its trees twisted and gnarled like the fingers of some ancient, malevolent being. Ethan Parker drove along the narrow, winding road, his headlights slicing through the oppressive darkness. His travel writer's instincts had drawn him to Halcyon, a town whispered about in obscure travel forums for its eerie silence and haunting beauty. Ethan parked his old sedan at the edge of the town, feeling a shiver of unease that he brushed off as nerves. The town was supposed to be charming, a forgotten relic from another era, and he was determined to capture its essence for his next piece. As he stepped out of his car, the cool night air wrapped around him, carrying with it an unsettling quiet. The streets of Halcyon were cobblestone, lined with Victorian-style houses, their facades dark and foreboding. There was an air of stillness, almost too perfect, as if time had stopped here. Ethan shrugged off the chill and began his walk, camera in hand. The first thing Ethan noticed was the silence. There were no chirping crickets, no distant hum of machinery, just an oppressive quiet that seemed to press down on him. He tried to shake it off as an odd but inconsequential quirk of the town. His footsteps echoed on the cobblestones, the only sound in the stillness. As he wandered deeper, Ethan saw the town's few inhabitants. They moved with a peculiar, almost robotic precision, their expressions vacant. When he tried to engage with them, they offered only blank stares before shuffling away. It was as if they were bound by an invisible thread, keeping them trapped in this eerie quiet. At the edge of town, Ethan found a quaint, old inn. The sign creaked as he pushed through the door, and he was greeted by a thin woman with hollow eyes. She was the only one who seemed to acknowledge his presence, albeit with a cold, distant demeanor. "I'm here for the night," Ethan said, trying to sound cheerful. "I've heard Halcyon is a great place to photograph." The woman's lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. "You're welcome to stay. Just remember, sound is not something we welcome after dark." Ethan raised an eyebrow but nodded, accepting the key to room 3. That night, as Ethan settled into his room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He decided to ignore it, focusing instead on reviewing his photos from the day. The silence outside was unnerving, but he was determined to make the best of his stay. Around midnight, he heard a faint whispering coming from the hallway. Curiosity piqued. He opened the door slightly and peered out. The hallway was empty, but the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. He followed the sound, which led him to an old, neglected graveyard behind the inn. The moon cast a ghostly light over the weathered tombstones, and the whispers seemed to swirl around him like a living thing. Among the graves, he noticed one with fresh flowers laid on it, an anomaly in this place of death. It was an unmarked grave, overgrown with weeds and moss. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine as he crouched to inspect it. As Ethan examined the grave, the ground beneath him began to tremble. Startled, he stumbled back, his flashlight flickering wildly. From the grave emerged ghostly figures, their hollow eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They were the Silent Watchers, bound by a curse to patrol the town and ensure that no noise disturbed their eternal vigil. The apparitions seemed to drift towards Ethan, their movements unnaturally fluid. Panicking, Ethan fled back to the inn, his heart pounding in his chest. He slammed the door behind him, but the whispers persisted, seeping through the cracks and chilling the air. Unable to sleep, Ethan spent the night researching the town's history. he discovered an old newspaper article about a century-old ritual, a pact made with a vengeful spirit to ensure the town's prosperity in exchange for silence and obedience. Those who broke the silence were doomed to become part of the Silent Watchers. Determined to find a way out, Ethan ventured into the town's library the next morning. The place was dusty and neglected, filled with old books and papers. He searched through the records, uncovering more about the curse. The townsfolk, he learned, were bound to a ritualistic silence to prevent the wrath of the spirit from consuming them. Ethan's attempts to break the silence, his loud footsteps, the creak of the inn's door, had already drawn the Silent Watcher's attention. As the sun set, the town's atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The Watchers emerged from the shadows, their elongated limbs stretching grotesquely as they prowled the streets. Ethan tried to stay as quiet as possible, but the fear and anxiety made it almost impossible. As night fell, the eerie figures grew bolder. Ethan could hear their ghostly whispers and see their hollow eyes peering through the gaps in his room's curtains. Desperate, he searched for a way to break the curse. He remembered a line from an old diary he'd read. To end the silence, the truth must be spoken. With nothing left to lose, Ethan took a deep breath and started speaking aloud, revealing his discovery of the town's dark history. The Silent Watchers responded to his words, converging on the inn with increasing urgency. Ethan's pleas for help and explanations only seemed to enrage them further. His voice, once a beacon of hope, now seemed like a siren call, drawing him closer to his doom. In a last-ditch effort to save himself, Ethan ventured to the old church at the center of town, hoping to find something that could help. The church was a place of eerie beauty, with ancient symbols carved into its walls, and a sense of overwhelming dread that filled the air. He found an old, dusty book detailing the original ritual. With trembling hands, Ethan recited the incantations from the book, hoping to appease the vengeful spirit and lift the curse. As he spoke, the Silent Watchers gathered around, their figures flickering in and out of sight. The atmosphere grew tense, the air thick with anticipation. Ethan's voice wavered, but he pressed on, determined to break the curse. The apparitions seemed to waver, their forms becoming less distinct. As Ethan finished the incantation, a wave of energy surged through the church. The Silent Watchers let out a haunting, mournful cry, their forms dissipating into the ether. The oppressive silence that had gripped Halcyon for so long began to lift. Exhausted and trembling, Ethan stumbled out of the church. The town was eerily quiet, but no longer menacing. The townsfolk, freed from their curse, began to stir, their once vacant expressions showing signs of life and relief. Ethan left Halcyon behind, the sun rising over the now peaceful town. He had uncovered its dark secret and broken the curse, but the memory of those haunting nights would stay with him forever. Marcus Kane had always been drawn to uncharted territories. His work as a cartographer led him to places others were too cautious to explore. Yet, Silent Hollow was a name that barely registered on the fringes of maps, its existence almost a rumor. The journal that had led him to the town was a curious relic, its pages yellowed with age and ink faded but legible. It spoke of a village lost to time, a place shrouded in perpetual silence with a mystery lurking just beneath its surface. As Marcus's carriage rumbled through the dense forest leading to Silent Hollow, he noticed how the trees seemed to close in on the path, their gnarled branches intertwining like skeletal fingers. The sun, high in the sky, barely pierced the thick canopy. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing mile, and the silence was punctuated only by the occasional creak of the carriage wheels. Arriving in Silent Hollow, Marcus was struck by the town's eerie serenity. The houses, with their Victorian architecture, looked as though they had been frozen in time. The streets were narrow and winding, lined with cobblestones that had long lost their luster. The mist that enveloped the town was so dense it seemed almost solid, pressing in on Marcus as he stepped out of his carriage. The townspeople were unlike anyone Marcus had ever encountered. They moved with a deliberate silence, their faces expressionless but watchful. When Marcus attempted to speak to them, they responded with frantic gestures and anxious glances. One elderly woman, her hair silver and thin as spider silk, raised a trembling finger to her lips before disappearing into her home. Undeterred, Marcus found himself at the Old Inn, a grand but dilapidated building that had clearly seen better days. The innkeeper, a man with deep-set eyes and a gaunt face, greeted Marcus with a nod and a silent offer of a room. The silence was unnerving but somehow inviting, like a cocoon of peace that hid something more sinister. As dusk began to fall, Marcus noticed the shift in the town's atmosphere. The air grew colder, and the once gentle mist became thick and swirling. The townspeople retreated indoors with an urgency that bordered on panic. Marcus, intrigued and somewhat unsettled, decided to explore the town further. It was then that he first encountered the whispering figures. As night deepened, Marcus wandered through the mist-shrouded streets, his footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the profound silence. Shadows seemed to dance at the edges of his vision, and the whispering started, a soft, unsettling murmur that felt like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere. The first spectral figure appeared as Marcus rounded a corner. It glided silently, its form obscured by the mist. The figure was featureless, its body elongated and translucent, with an unnatural grace that defied reality. Marcus froze, a chill running down his spine as he watched the figure disappear into the fog. Determined to understand what was happening, Marcus returned to the inn and tried to research the town's history. The library was a dusty, forgotten room filled with old tomes and papers. He pored over ancient newspapers and town records, discovering cryptic references to a vow of silence and an eternal curse. The writings hinted at a pact made centuries ago, but details were vague and shrouded in myth. His research revealed that Silent Hollow had been cursed long ago by an unknown entity. The curse demanded silence, and anyone who broke the vow was doomed to become one of the whispering specters. The curse was meant to protect the town from an unspeakable evil, but it had also trapped its inhabitants in a state of perpetual fear and isolation. The whispers grew more insistent that night. Marcus tried to sleep, but the murmurs seemed to seep through the walls and into his dreams. He would wake in a cold sweat, the echo of ghostly voices haunting him. Desperate to find answers, he sought out the townspeople, but they remained tight-lipped, their fear evident. On the third night, the situation escalated. The spectral figures became bolder, emerging in greater numbers. Their whispers grew louder, more distinct, and Marcus could make out fragments of words, frantic, pleading, angry. The figures seemed to be aware of him, their hollow eyes following his every move. One evening, while walking through the misty streets, Marcus encountered a young woman standing alone. Her eyes were wide with terror, and she looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. She began to sign rapidly, her gestures a desperate attempt to communicate. Marcus struggled to understand, but he caught glimpses of words like curse, escape, and vow. The woman's name was Eliza, and she had lived in Silent Hollow all her life. She revealed that the curse had been passed down through generations, a dark legacy that bound the town in silence. The spectral figures were not only bound by the curse, but were also driven by a hunger for new souls. Eliza, having lost family members to the curse, was determined to break it, but had no idea how. Marcus and Eliza began to work together, searching for clues to lift the curse. They explored the town's outskirts, finding abandoned homes and forgotten graves. They discovered an old chapel hidden in the forest, its walls covered in ancient symbols and inscriptions. The chapel seemed to hold the key to understanding the curse, but its secrets were protected by the spectral figures. The deeper they delved, the more dangerous their quest became. The specters grew increasingly aggressive, their whispers turning into howls of rage as they realized that Marcus and Eliza were uncovering the truth. The town's eerie silence was punctuated by the sounds of spectral pursuits, and the mist seemed to thicken, closing in on them. In the chapel, they found an old, weathered book bound in black leather. The book contained a ritual to break the curse, but the instructions were incomplete and cryptic. Marcus and Eliza worked tirelessly to decipher the text, piecing together the fragments of the ritual while fending off the specter's attacks. The climax came during a full moon, when the mist was at its densest. The town was plunged into an unnatural darkness, and the spectral figures roamed the streets with renewed fervor. Marcus and Eliza performed the ritual at the heart of the chapel, their voices trembling as they recited the ancient incantations. The air crackled with tension, and the mist seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. As they completed the ritual, the specters began to writhe and convulse, their whispers turning into anguished screams. The mist started to lift, and the town's oppressive silence was finally broken by the sound of the wind and distant wildlife. The specters dissipated, their forms dissolving into the night as the curse's grip on Silent Hollow weakened. With the dawn, Silent Hollow began to change. The townspeople emerged from their homes, their faces reflecting a mix of relief and confusion. The oppressive atmosphere that had once suffocated the town seemed to lift, and the air was filled with the sounds of a world that had been waiting to be heard. Marcus and Eliza, having broken the curse, prepared to leave Silent Hollow. Their journey had been fraught with danger and terror, but their perseverance had brought an end to the town's centuries-old torment. As they drove away, Marcus glanced back at the town, now bathed in the light of the morning sun, its streets no longer shrouded in mist, but marked by the scars of its dark past. Silent Hollow became a place of legend, a cautionary tale for travelers, and a reminder of the price of breaking sacred vows. Marcus Kane's name was remembered as a symbol of courage and curiosity, his story a testament to the enduring power of silence and the supernatural forces that lurk beyond its boundaries. The whispers of Silent Hollow were no longer just a chilling memory, but a part of history, a story that would continue to echo through the ages. Ethan Cole's boots crunched over the uneven cobblestones of Eldermere, each step echoing in the stillness of the forsaken town. The air was heavy with fog, swirling around the Victorian facades of buildings long forgotten by time. It was an overcast afternoon, with the sun barely breaking through the dense canopy of gray clouds overhead. Ethan had traveled far, his curiosity piqued by rumors of an abandoned town that promised hauntingly beautiful photographs. The town seemed to breathe with an unsettling quiet. No birds sang, no distant chatter filled the air. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Ethan's camera clicked softly as he captured the desolate streets, his breath forming brief clouds in the cold, still air. As evening approached, Ethan noticed a peculiar absence of human presence. The houses were impeccably maintained, yet the windows were dark and vacant, like the eyes of a ghost. He marveled at the eerie beauty of the place, unaware of the darkness that lurked just beyond his sight. As dusk fell, the town's unsettling silence deepened. The fog thickened and shadows began to stretch and writhe in the dimming light. Ethan, engrossed in his exploration, ventured deeper into the town, his camera's flash briefly cutting through the growing darkness. The silence was occasionally punctuated by the distant creak of a door or the rustle of leaves, sounds that made Ethan's skin crawl. In the heart of Eldermere, he stumbled upon a small inn with a flickering light in the window. Desperate for a place to stay, Ethan knocked on the door. It creaked open slightly, revealing an empty, dimly lit lobby. The innkeeper was nowhere to be seen, but a handwritten note on the counter read, "Welcome, silence is your safety." Confused but weary, Ethan decided to stay the night. As he settled into a creaky bed, the town outside was enveloped in an eerie stillness. Midnight approached, and with it came a growing sense of dread. Ethan's curiosity got the better of him, and he stepped outside to investigate the unsettling silence. The fog had thickened, swallowing the street lamps and casting long, wavering shadows. Ethan's footsteps echoed louder than before, each sound magnified in the oppressive silence. As he wandered, he began to notice the shadowy figures in the distance, tall, thin silhouettes that seemed to glide effortlessly through the mist. Their movements were eerily synchronized, and they seemed to be watching him with an unsettling stillness. Suddenly, a chill ran down Ethan's spine as he realized the figures were not merely shadows, but something far more sinister. He had stumbled into a macabre dance of spectral beings, their hollow eyes and elongated limbs casting a grotesque ballet. Their presence was suffocating, and Ethan felt an urgent need to retreat. Rushing back to the inn, he found the door ajar and the interior deserted. The silence was now punctuated by the faint, ghostly whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls. Ethan's heart raced as he tried to make sense of the eerie phenomena. In the dead of night, Ethan was jolted awake by a series of muffled noises coming from outside. Peering through the window, he saw the shadowy figures closer than before, their movements more deliberate and threatening. He could make out indistinct shapes in their ranks, twisted, phantom-like forms that sent shivers down his spine. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan ventured back into the town, searching for answers. His investigation led him to a decrepit library, where he discovered old records and dusty books detailing Eldermere's dark past. The town's curse was revealed in fragments of faded pages, a pact made centuries ago with an ancient evil binding the town to a vow of silence. Any noise would awaken the Silent Ones, malevolent spirits destined to torment the living. The deeper Ethan delved into the town's history, the more he understood the nature of the Silent Ones. They were bound to the curse, existing as manifestations of the town's collective fears and sins. They were drawn to any disturbance in the silence, their hunger for noise insatiable. Ethan's attempts to contact the townspeople were met with fearful glances and frantic gestures. They were prisoners of their own making, bound by the ancient vow to remain silent or face the wrath of the Silent Ones. Ethan realized that his own presence had unknowingly broken this vow, making him a target for the spectral hunters. With the Silent Ones growing bolder, Ethan had to act quickly. He retraced his steps to the library, hoping to find a way to lift the curse. The town's history spoke of a ritual that could reverse the pact, but it required a sacrifice, one who would willingly give up their voice to save the others. As the clock ticked towards midnight, Ethan faced the terrifying reality that he might have to sacrifice himself to break the curse. The Silent Ones were now closing in, their whispers growing louder and more insistent. The boundary between the living and the dead was blurring, and Ethan could feel the oppressive presence of the spectral figures pressing in on him. In a desperate bid to save himself and the cursed town, Ethan performed the ritual described in the library. It was a harrowing ordeal, involving the burning of ancient symbols and the recitation of forgotten incantations. As he chanted, the Silent Ones closed in, their ghostly forms almost tangible in their menace. The ritual reached its climax as Ethan made the ultimate sacrifice. He severed his ties to the world of the living, surrendering his voice to the ancient evil. The Silent Ones recoiled, their forms dissipating into the mist as the curse was lifted. The town's oppressive silence was broken, and the figures that had haunted Eldermere vanished. As dawn broke over Eldermere, the town was transformed. The once ominous buildings now stood bathed in the soft light of morning, their oppressive silence replaced by the gentle sounds of nature. The townspeople emerged from their homes, their faces etched with a mix of relief and sorrow. Ethan's sacrifice had lifted the curse, but it had come at a great cost. He was now a part of the town's dark history, a silent figure in the shadows of Eldermere. The town continued to thrive, but the memory of Ethan's sacrifice remained a haunting reminder of the price of breaking the silence. Eldermere moved forward, its silence now a choice rather than a curse. The memory of the silent ones and the traveler who had given everything to save them lingered as a testament to the power of sacrifice and the darkness that lurks in the quietest corners.
Thank you for joining us on this bone-chilling adventure into the dark and unknown. We hope you enjoyed the eerie tales of cursed towns, haunted melodies, and restless spirits. If these stories left you with a lingering shiver, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more spine-tingling content, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep your lights on and your wits about you. This is Fear Files, signing off.